Jairus is someone who, first off, he knew how to get in touch with Jesus Christ. He found him, and he didn't stop until he did. So, our children need parents that pray. Secondly, our children need parents that won't quit, that no matter what, and no matter how difficult or tragic the situation is, that we are going to find Jesus Christ. We are going to get something out of our faith. We're going to get something out of prayer. We're going to get something out of our church family. This is going to be improved and made better. So they have a hold of that with some tenacity. Hey, I'm Pastor Shane, and this is What Christians Ought to Know. I'm glad you're joining me. I've got a Bible study that I want to do with you from the book of Mark, chapter 5, and we're going to be looking at verses 21 through 43. However, not all of those verses. There's a great big chunk, about 10 or so, that we're not going to be going through. So, looking at Mark chapter 5, let's go ahead and get started, okay? And when Jesus was passed over again by ship unto the other side, much people gathered unto him, and he was nigh unto the sea. And behold, there came one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and when he saw him, he fell at his feet, and besought him greatly, saying, My little daughter lieth at the point of death. I pray thee, come and lay hands on her, that she may be healed, and she shall live. Jesus went with him, and much people followed him and thronged him. So if you've ever seen, during a sporting event or a parade or a concert or anything like that, and you see just masses of people, and they're literally shoulder to shoulder. And we're getting into the account what we're not going to be looking at, but what is in the middle of this story is the woman with an issue of blood. And remember, she was trying to just get through the press and just get the hem of his garment, because there were so many people. So we do have the picture here. We have the verse in verse number 24 that says, much people thronged him. Again, you've got a compression of at least hundreds, but probably thousands of people. But definitely hundreds, and they're all packed in tight. They want to hear him. They don't have things such as microphones and anything like that. He's by the sea. So if you've ever been by the ocean, there's sort of a roar from that and the oceans and everything that's going on. But anyway, there's a lot of people here following Jesus Christ, and here comes Jairus. And in another account with the other Gospels, people knew him. They spoke well of him. He was a good man. But he comes in. He's got probably his robe and his attire on, or he's at least a wealthy individual. And he comes and he finds Jesus Christ, and he fell at his feet. And that's in verse number 22. And now, in studying this in the past, there are times where I just get on a catch and I study and look up every word. But when he fell at his feet, think about falling at somebody's feet. And what you're doing is, I've got the word crashed. He crashed at the feet of Jesus. And, this is not the situation where Jesus is a spare tire and, now he's coming to Jesus Christ or anything like that. This is just a place of complete, total surrender, and then also hope, because he found and he's connected to Jesus Christ. So you've got Jesus walking along, probably beside the beach or very close to it. You've got hundreds and hundreds of people around him, and here comes Jairus, who makes his way through. Maybe he's running, maybe just people understand to get out of this guy's way. They don't know what's going on, and he falls at the feet of Jesus Christ. And now it says in number 23, besought him greatly. Without us getting animated, we can understand that this guy is really asking and requesting. He's begging Jesus. He says, my little daughter lies at the point of death. We find out later in this that she's 12 years old. But just again, some of the adjectives and the descriptions and the words, my little daughter, this is somebody who he regards as being innocent, and someone who he regards shouldn't be suffering the way that she is. So he's found Jesus. He's begging him. He says, listen, here's what's going on. My little daughter lies at the point of death, and I'm begging you to come and lay your hands on her, that she may be healed and she shall live. And, Jesus just straight up goes with him. So here's the title of this devotion, okay? And maybe I haven't gone into this right. But through this passage and this account of Jairus, Again, as in all of Scripture, there's an application for us. And if I was to title this, it would be the needs of the children. And we're going to look at Jairus, and as parents and as believers, there's some things we can learn. Okay, so with the idea and the thought, the needs of the children, and we've got this character Jairus that we're going to look at and take a look at and analyze. The very first thing when you talk about our children, our grandchildren, the children of this generation of America, our country, society, the very first thing they need is parents that pray. And of course, Jairus is motivated because he doesn't want to see her die, and because she is at the point of death. It might be she has cancer, it might be leukemia. We don't know what it is, but she's bedridden and at the point of death. And in just a few verses, we're going to find out that she does indeed die. We need to have a greater understanding, of myself included, what our children are facing in schools, even Christian schools, from time to time, oftentimes in society, on the internet. The way that our government is looking at our children and things that are happening, and issues that really and truly, we didn't have to deal with, we didn't consider, but they are today because it's being thrown up in their face. The first thing that our children need is parents that pray, and parents that know how to get in touch with Jesus, first and foremost. And let that be something for all of us. So he finds Jesus. Number 24, Jesus went with him, and much people followed him and thronged him. And then in verse number 25, and I put a parenthesis in my Bible, 25 to the very end of 34, is the account of the woman with the issue of blood. And the account of the woman with the issue of blood, there's been songs written about it. There's been many a sermon preached about this woman with the issue of blood, and just reaching through and just telling herself, I can just touch the hem of his garment, and then she becomes healed. We know that account. So Jairus has found Jesus Christ. He crashes at his feet, and he's got Jesus. Of all these hundreds of people, and all these things, there's distractions that can come from anywhere. Remember, in other accounts, you've got blind individuals that are hollering for him, yelling for him, people that are bringing their friends through the roof to get to Jesus. And so Jairus has found him. He's crashed at his feet. Jesus is coming with him. Well, here comes this woman with the issue of blood, and she has her time with him. And in verse number 30, Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that virtue had gone out of him, turned him about in the press and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And so Jairus is thinking, oh man, I've got him, but now he's distracted. Now something's going on. And so that is happening. Listen to verse number 35, okay? We come out of this parentheses from 25 to 34. In verse number 35, while he yet spake, and this is Jesus Christ who is talking to this woman that's just touched him. While he is addressing her, here comes a servant of Jairus. And he says in number 35, while he yet spake, there came from the ruler of the synagogue's house someone which said, Thy daughter is dead. Why troublest thou the master any further? As soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, he saith unto the ruler of the synagogue, Be not afraid, only believe. So you've got Jesus' turn talking to this woman. You've got a guy who says, Your daughter's died. Don't bother the master anymore. And if you think about that, there's another sermon, another devotion that could come from this, comparing verse number 35 and verse number 40 when they're laughing at Jesus. We'll get there in a few minutes. But the company of individuals and the types of people, probably family members, definitely friends, individuals that were working for Jairus, they weren't very encouraging. And they weren't very gentle. They weren't very compassionate. They weren't very empathetic. They were just themselves, without a whole lot of regard, it seems, to Jairus. Somebody says, Your daughter's dead. Why troublest thou the master any further? There's no discretion there. There's no tug, and just looks at Jairus and shakes his head. That would be sufficient. But anyway, that's the conversation that happens. And in number 36 of Mark chapter 5, I hope you've got this last phrase, underlined. but this is a command. This is instruction. This is a declarative statement from Jesus Christ. It says, "Be not afraid, only believe." And I don't know about you, but there's some times when I need to see those red letters and understand, "Be not afraid, only believe." But that's in Mark 5:36. And the other thing that I see that we can apply to our children, um, parents that won't quit. When this woman with the issue of blood has gotten the attention of Christ, and she's got 9 verses that are all several sentences long through this passage. There's a big dialogue going there, and all these people, and I've seen individuals so anxious and so upset that they can't keep their focus for more than a few minutes, and they just wander off, and they just think, oh, this, the worst is happening. Well, then when someone that knows him and someone that he knows and that knows the situation comes through the crowd, the way that Jairus was looking for Jesus, they were looking for Jairus. They found him. They said, "Your daughter's dead. Don't trouble the master anymore." That would have been another, while Jesus is talking, to get that message and just slip away. You can picture that in your mind. We know there are times and occasions where someone just slips behind the scenes and where'd he go? He's gone. Okay. Jairus didn't do that. And so first, we're talking about the application and something to stimulate our thinking and to consider how we are, to consider our children. None of us, really, we don't think enough about their needs and know enough exactly where they are, be it spiritually or in their relationship with their friends or what they're dealing with, confusion or questions that they might have with life, whatever it might be. But Jairus is someone who, first off, he knew how to get in touch with Jesus Christ. He found him, and he didn't stop until he did. So, our children need parents that pray. Secondly, our children need parents that won't quit, that no matter what, and no matter how difficult or tragic the situation is, that we are going to find Jesus Christ. We are going to get something out of our faith. We're going to get something out of prayer. We're going to get something out of our church family. This is going to be improved and made better. So they have a hold of that with some tenacity. Now, let's keep going on verse number 37. So he tells him, he turns from the woman, he hears that, and then as soon as his master, this servant is done speaking, he says, "Be not afraid, only believe." Number 37, he suffered no man to follow him, save Peter and James and John, the brother of James. And he comes to the house of the ruler of the synagogue and sees the crowd and them that wept and wailed greatly. The third thing that our children need from this passage is parents that bring Jesus home. I don't know about you. My children have seen me pray. They've seen me weep. They've seen me teach and preach. And they've also seen times when I've lost my temper. They've also seen times where I've been distressed. They've gone to church and worshiped with me regularly. But also I've worshiped with my children at home. And I can talk with my children about Jesus at home. And I hope that you can, because our children need parents that bring Jesus home. That when the pastor's not around, when the Sunday school teacher's not around, the superintendent, whoever it might be, that mom and dad know how to talk with their children about our faith and about Jesus Christ. And, it's not unusual or bizarre for mom or dad to read directly from the Bible and talk about our faith and talk about Jesus and talk about how we live by faith. Our children need parents that pray. They need parents that won't quit. And they need parents that bring Jesus home. So we're going to keep going. Number 39, he was come in and said unto them, Why make ye this ado and weep? The damsel is not dead, but sleepeth. Number 40, they laughed him to scorn. But when he had put them out. Now that's a scene right there. And let's read verse number 40 all the way through. They laughed him to scorn, but when he had put them all out, he takes the father and the mother of the damsel, and then are with him, and enters in where the damsel was lying. So Jairus has not gone to see the daughter. And no doubt he comes, he puts his arm around his wife, he's heard the news. There's probably had to be some looks back and forth between Jairus and his wife of understanding and comforting. But they come in and they're spectators to all this, even though it's in their house and such. But they laugh Jesus Christ to scorn, which means they laugh and, oh, you think you can tell the difference between somebody that's asleep and dead? And, we've been here all this time. Who are you? Whatever. And then he has to put them out. He gets those people out of the house. So that would be a very drastic and a little bit unnerving. But again, Jairus and the mother of the young girl are just watching this. And so are Peter, James, and John. They're still disciples. They're still following. They're still learning about Jesus Christ. And, as you go through this, and if you want to look at this and read it on your own, and to really picture and concentrate and imagine these things happening, what would that look like if you're watching Jesus, come in and he's got to be loud. I mean, these people, they're weeping and wailing greatly in verse number 38. Weeping and wailing greatly. We don't know if she's been dead for hours or a day, who knows, between where Christ was and where Jairus lived. But he gets the attention of everybody, and he asks everybody, and Jesus knows how to project his voice. You know that he knows how to do that. And he says, why make you this to do and weep? The damsel's not dead, but sleeps. And they laughed him to scorn, but when he had put them all out. So it wasn't that he just, forget about them and go on with the mom and dad. He gets them out of the house. And this had to take, several minutes. And again, the disciples are watching. The mom and dad are watching. So he takes all of them into where she is lying. They've got her in a bed, no doubt, somewhere. Number 41, he took the damsel by the hand and said unto her, Talitha, which is being interpreted, damsel, I say unto thee, arise. I know I didn't say that right. I don't speak Hebrew. But it's there in red letters. And number 42, straightway the damsel arose and walked. For she was of the age of 12 years, and they were astonished with a great astonishment. And he charged them straightly that no man should know it, and commanded that something should be given her to eat. So, when you look at this in verse number 42, and again, and even preparing for this video, and I'm familiar with this passage, the damsel arose and walked. Now, every movie that I've ever seen, every TV episode where somebody comes out of a coma or they're in a hospital or they wake up, they don't start walking. They stay in the bed, and maybe if they want to embrace someone, they move from the waist up and they give them a hug or whatever, and then just stay here and rest. But she gets up and she walks. And really, I read 42 and 43 with a reason. I wanted us to take a look at this situation, okay, and we're going to go to another passage from here, just a couple of pages off. But listen to this. She arose and she walked. So this demonstrates, for me in my mind, whatever she had, if it was leukemia, if it was cancer, and it could have been anything, whatever she had, it's over. It's finished. So that's situation number one. And I think, when she arose, she woke up, she arose, and she walked. She walks to her mom, she walks to her dad. She gets up out of where she was. And this demonstrates, for me, she's been healed. But then in number 43, he charged them that they should tell that nobody should know it, and commanded that something should be given her to eat. Now, there's two different things going on. One, the dad brought Jesus home, but he's healed their daughter. Give her something to eat. Well, she's been healed. And I want you to consider the two aspects of this, and let me hurry up and get to it. Okay, so she's come out, she's healed of leukemia, she's healed of cancer, but then give her something to eat. Even though that the physical issue is gone, she still has to recover. That him to command, give her something to eat, is she needs some food. She needs to recoup her strength. And I want you to think about, as you pray to Jesus Christ for something, and as you are needing the help and the involvement of Jesus Christ for something, maybe it's a divorce, maybe it's your own loss of a loved one, and there's a dozen things that could happen. and you get through that situation, even if it's miraculously. If you come through a divorce, you come through yourself having cancer or a heart attack, or you come through the loss of a loved one or something traumatic, there's still that thing to be dealt with, and there's still your own or someone else's recovery after the fact. Okay? So there's two different things. This girl, I believe, has been healed. However, with her body, being bedridden, and the sicker you are, the less of an appetite you have. We've all been so sick. You've seen people lose weight when they get sick. You've seen people, they just have no appetite. When you're at the point of death, you don't care anything about food or even water. So that's what's happened with her. If she's, been sick, so Jairus has enough time to go and find Jesus Christ. This is that bad. Please come and lay hands on my daughter and heal her. She's at the point of death. She's not had an appetite maybe for days. I remember, I was 10, 11, or 12, and I had a real bad sinus infection. It was incredible. And I just didn't have any appetite. I've had my own children so sick. They just have no appetite. And Jesus, yet, he's healed her, but it's a separate matter. That one, her body needs to recover, and or, the parents need something to do besides just hugging her. Hey, go make her lunch, go make her food. But he commanded them to do that. I think it's worth us noting, one, the other needs of children is parents that follow instructions, parents that can hear from Jesus and get instructions from Scripture. So in the application, aside from the story, the needs of the children, parents that pray, parents that don't quit, parents that bring Jesus home, and parents that can follow instructions. We want our kids to follow instructions. We also need to follow instructions of the Lord. And then when you look at the actual account, there's a separate principle here. I believe she was healed from whatever the infirmity was. But then there was a time when Jesus said, you still got to recover from fighting or being sick. You're not sick anymore. Leukemia is gone, but you haven't eaten right for 2 weeks. You haven't eaten right for 3 days. Or you haven't eaten right, for the past 12 or 24 hours. She's 12 years old. And Jesus says, get her some food. That needs to be priority number one. I'm telling you, make sure she eats right now. And there's a separate thought, that you might have come out of any tragedy or trauma. You still have to get yourself together after that. I just happened to catch something on the radio yesterday, as a matter of fact, in the power of grief counseling, for children that have lost their parents. I know individuals that have gone through divorce. Those children need counseling from a third party who cares about them, their emotional development, their mental state, and their spiritual understanding about what's happening with mom and dad. It could be your pastor. It could be a professional. That's fine. But understand there is a trauma, and then there is a recovery from the trauma. Different situation. So in Mark chapter 8, going to verse number 22, listen to this. This is just fascinating to me. Mark chapter 8, verse number 22, he comes to Bethsaida, and they bring him a blind man unto him and besought him to touch him. So here's a guy who's been brought to Jesus Christ, can't see. We get that. He took the blind man by the hand, led him out of the town. When he had spit on his eyes, he put his hands upon him and asked him if he could see aught. He looked up and said, I see men as trees walking. After that, he put his hands again upon his eyes and made him look up, and he was restored and saw every man clearly. Do you get that? Jesus spits in this guy's eyes, lays his hands on him. Can you see? Well, they look like trees. They're blurry. And we understand that because we keep reading. We're in Mark chapter 8, verse number 22 through 25. And verse number 24, he says, I see men as trees. They're blurry and fuzzy. Number 25, after he, meaning Jesus, put his hands again upon his eyes and made him look up, he was restored and saw every man clearly. He needed a second touch from Jesus. I say that to you to remind you, and when we go to Jesus Christ and we see that something has happened, you might still need to continue. You still might need to keep going until there's clarity, until there is peace. Things happen, circumstances occur. Maybe it was the Lord, maybe it wasn't. But it is okay to keep going to Jesus after a matter for clarity or peace. Remember that Paul went to the Lord in 2 Corinthians chapter 12 and besought him 3 times about that thorn in the flesh. And finally the Lord says, don't ask me anymore. The answer is no, my grace is sufficient for you. But spiritually, what I believe is, and what my personal experience and in my spirit, I believe God talks through Scripture. He can talk through, a sermon, even a song from time to time. But there's going to be an impression. And I have felt liberty, to leave or to move on from something before, and I've felt restricted before to continue and not to go anywhere. One time specifically, at a church I was at, I didn't feel liberty from the Lord to leave that church. I needed to stay there. And then there was a time where I did feel liberty, so I left. And, if you still feel something in your spirit urging you to continue, then mind that. This guy could see people well enough they were blurry, but he could see it was an improvement, and he didn't just say, well, I'll take it, thank you. The Lord asked him, can you see everything okay? And he touched him again. He was restored. After that, he put his hands again upon his eyes, number 25, and made him look up. And he was restored and saw every man clearly. So it was a second touch. Now, Jesus can heal blind individuals. Just going over to chapter 10, turning another page or two and looking at verse number 51, he heals a blind man. He doesn't take him by the hand. He doesn't spit on his eyes. He doesn't make clay. He just simply speaks. Mark 10:51, Jesus answered and said unto him, what wilt thou that I should do unto thee? The blind man said unto him, Lord, that I might receive my sight. Jesus said unto him, go thy way, thy faith hath made thee whole. And immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus in the way. Just spoke. So we don't know the details. And again, I think that the Lord knows us. And when we have a need and we go to the Lord, He wants to do something in our understanding of Him and how that we learn trust in Him and how that we interact with Him. It is all about relationships. I believe that God wants to teach us in our relationship with Jesus Christ and with others. It's something we have to learn. And for whatever reason, Jesus took him out of town, away from everybody, away from everything, spit in his eyes, laid his hands on him, asked him if he could see everything clearly. He couldn't. He put his hands again upon his eyes, and then he could. Then you go over to chapter 10, Jesus says, what is it that you need? Well, Lord, I want to be able to see. Go your way. Your faith has made you whole. Just speaking. And the guy can see clearly. He begins to follow Jesus Christ. Keep going until you get peace, or until there's clarity and you have an understanding. Again, I've said this in one of my videos before. I don't have too many, but the veil was torn. We have a God who has put His Spirit within us, and He does lead us. He does impress things upon us. I believe He will restrict us. I believe He will give us freedom, encourage us, comfort us, and through His Word speak to us. So keep going. It is okay to ask Jesus Christ for even more, even if you see Him move in a situation. It is okay, going back to chapter 5, that after you come from a trauma, that you recover, be it physically or mentally, emotionally, or spiritually, that you recover from that trauma, because they're two separate events. Going through a divorce or the loss of a loved one is separate from the recovery of that trauma. Okay, so I want to encourage you to go back to Mark chapter 5, read through that account, study, meditate on those verses. Then we went over to Mark chapter 8, verse number 22 through 25, and we looked at how he touched and healed a guy twice who got a second touch. And then we just, for comparison, in Mark chapter 10, verse number 51 and 52, he just spoke, and the guy was healed of blindness. So those are some accounts. Hope you get a blessing out of that, or learn something, get some encouragement. Keep going. There's victory to be had. Thanks for joining me and watching this video. Hope I can see you again soon. May God bless.